Today on CityCast Chicago, Governor Pritzker proposes a $53 billion budget, how the Field Museum is enacting new regulations on Indigenous artifacts, and back-to-back is nice, but a three-peat is even better. Breaking it all down this week is freelance journalist Britt Julius and Axios Chicago social host Moyo Adeolu. It's Friday, February 23rd. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Good morning, Britt. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me again.
We are always happy to have you. And Moyo, welcome to CityCast Chicago for your very first time.
Thank you. I'm super excited.
Earlier this week on the podcast, we met with some of our friends from over at The Infatuation to talk about some of Chicago's best speakeasy supper clubs and some of its favorite hidden restaurants. One of my favorite things to do on the podcast is to get weekend plans from the people who are on the show. It makes it much easier for me. So, Britt, I want to start with you. What's one of your favorite speakeasies or recommendation you got for the CityCast folks?
My recommendations are probably not too hip. I feel like once I turned 30, I kind of, just got out of the loop when it came to like restaurants, at least, or bars. But I always have really loved Blind Barber for their music lineup, their DJ lineup. Just always have a great time there. They are, in an area of the West Loop that is not necessarily very progressive music-wise. They, will bring in some DJs who, do things that are a little bit different. Violet Hour was the first one I ever went to and still kind of holds like a nice place in my heart. That was, sort of when my friends and I were trying to, we're like, oh, we're cool and cute, whatever. And, making no money, but it was a nice experience. And I feel like one that I went to last year with a couple of my friends, initially thinking it was going to be very cheesy, but I actually really loved it, was the Magic Lounge in Andersonville.
No, that's what Simone has put us on that one. So people got love for it.
It's so great. Like, it's so, like, it's good. It just, I don't know. Like, and you're thinking, like, I don't like this, but it's perfect. I love it.
I ain't gonna lie. I love to live in the memories of being the friend who introduced a couple of other friends to Blind Barber, like, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Good times.
Yes.
Moyo, do you have a speakeasy recommendation, a place you like to go to get a drink in Chicago?
So I was telling you guys, I just moved back to Chicago. So I'm actually like learning new places myself, if I'm being very honest. Just yesterday was National Margarita Day, and we went to Bodega, which is like a taco Mexican joint, but then they showed me their own version of their speakeasy behind I guess you can say the restaurant area. I know of Room 13, but I'm still learning. I'm just adjusting and coming back to Chicago. So I'm going to take your recommendations, though.
Hey, we gave you a new thing to be looking out for, a new list for you to discover over the next few months. But if people want to see some of our larger recommendations, make sure you check out our episode from earlier this Wednesday with our friends Adrian and John. If you're new to CityCast Chicago, every Friday we like to bring in some great voices from across the city of Chicago to talk about the stories that were important to them, the stories they were working on, their colleagues were working on. And this week, Governor Pritzker came out and gave his state of the state and his budget proposal. And let's just hit the big number again. $53 billion is what the governor is asking for lawmakers to vote on. And that includes everything from tax increases for businesses, tax breaks for families with children under 3. It includes new money for arrivals and the growing number of asylum seekers in Illinois. Axios Chicago did a nice breakdown. Our friends Justin and Carrie were all over Governor Pritzker's budget proposal. Moyo, what were some highlights that people want to watch out for?
Yeah, definitely. We've been really covering, the Axios reporters have been covering the migrant crisis here in Chicago and how Pritzker is going to approach that. Of course, a lot of the Republicans are not really pleased with his approach because it's pretty much kind of citizens versus non-citizens and how he's allocating a lot of money to non-citizens.
Pritzker is, pushing some big money behind it for new arrivals, which again, for people who may have not been paying attention, just here in Chicago, we're approaching 40,000 new arrivals having been sent via Texas, via Florida, and the governor is asking for $181 million. Him and Mayor Johnson at times have seemed at odds about their approach in terms of housing, temporary shelter, how to get work visas to people. So we will continue to kind of navigate how each of these individuals are spending the money they're asking for, because Mayor Johnson in his own budget has allocated $150 million, and people are wondering how that's going to be spent throughout the year.
They also talked about medical debt, and I was really pleased to see how Pritzker approached that issue and how he wants to kind of combat health insurance reforms and how he wants to make sure that people are, first of all, staying alive, right? But then also getting the best healthcare possible for the patient. So I was really pleased to see how he approached that, as well as maternal mortality rates for Black women. That is something that the Senate, and not in the Senate, but across the U.S., people have been talking about how so many people of color are sometimes not treated correctly, right, in your everyday doctor office, or how unfortunately Black women are dying when it comes to giving birth compared to white women. So I'm really interested to see how the lawmakers approach that legislation.
When we talk about medical debt, the governor is putting up money to potentially $10 million to erase medical debt for 364,000 Illinois residents. We spent so much time talking about student loan debt, but it is often medical debt in addition to that, breaks people financially. So many of us, may be 1-2 tragedies away from real financial ruin. And for a lot of people, and I know in my family as well, medical debt can be a big source of stress. And then you talked about how lawmakers are being asked to approach the disproportionate rate at which Black women die during childbirth. And Governor Pritzker says he wants to give a $1 million grant to fund opening birthing centers, including the new Chicago Southside Birth Center. And he pledged to ensure that doulas, midwives, and lactation consultants are classified as medical health care providers. Britt, I want to bring it over to you. The big picture here, as Axios reminds us, the state is nearly facing $1 billion deficit. And so Pritzker has a big hole to fill through that. We may see tax breaks for families with young children. We may also see potential tax hikes on large businesses. What are you watching for throughout this sort of state budget season, especially as we're getting prepared for a nationwide and local election?
In an election season, right, people have a tendency to see things in black and white and to sort of process things in black and white, right? But these sort of budget initiatives, if they, kind of go through, will really affect the average everyday person. I wasn't, aware of the extent of what he had sort of included in his budget plans, but hearing specifically about things like medical debt, which we all know is, can be really dire for people, but it's not really discussed pretty much at all. And oftentimes, a large swath of medical debt could be excluded just from, they'll reduce the numbers down, right? So they'll say like, 500,000 is owed, but if you pay 250,000, then we'll wipe all of it out, right? So those kind of, initiatives and plans can really affect people on that day-to-day sort of basis. And that's what I'm sort of looking for as well. Because I think those are the things that are going to be especially impactful for people. And they can sort of point to and look at and be like, okay, I may not agree with everything, but this particular thing affects my life and I have found some relief from it.
One thing many advocates are asking both the governor and the mayor to do more is be more transparent and increase funding for survivors and advocates for gender-based violence. And one exhibit that you wrote about, Britt, really sort of gets at the heart of this issue and why it is so important that we be raising our voices and drawing more attention. Can you tell people a little bit more about the Black Girlhood Altar?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote about Black Girlhood Altar, specifically for Cultured Magazine, and it is a continuation of a piece that has gone up at a variety of different local as well as national sort of organizations, institutions, and things like that, including the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Chicago, created by Sherazade Tillett and Robert Narciso from A Long Walk Home. It really sort of shines a spotlight on violence, murder, and sort of sex-based crimes that typically affect Black women or Black girls. And so with the expansion of this exhibit at the Chicago Cultural Center as part of the Chicago Architectural Biennial, it really allowed the creators to sort of shine a light on a larger number of victims. It's a really sort of immersive experience, takes you through 3 different rooms. I remember when I first saw it at the MCA a couple years ago, it was just in 1 room, and now it's, expanded to 3 rooms. And it's not just sort of focusing on the trauma as it kind of currently stands or what it was, but also looking at, sort of what happens in terms of healing, recovery, hope, and change for the future.
The exhibit is called Freedom Square, The Black Girlhood Altar. It's on view at the Chicago Cultural Center through March 10th. Britt, Chicago has a rich tradition across cultures of ofrendas, of altars. What can people expect to see when they go, and how are they being asked to interact or, maybe even take part in the altar in their own way?
Absolutely. So, as the exhibit has grown from stop to stop, Sherazade has added new pieces to the altar. Oftentimes people who, view it, witness it, they want to provide something as well. In one room, there's an altar that has, flowers, roller skates, kind of childlike makeup and candles and like baby dolls and things like that. So really kind of representing girlhood and joy and beauty and the things that, we really cherish that are often sort of taken from us. I think as well, sort of knowing the scope of the violence that was enacted on, the women and girls who are sort of featured in this exhibition. These kind of items as well really sort of hint at or point to the fact that innocence is often taken from young Black girls at a much earlier age than, girls of other races or ethnicities and things like that. So it's sort of like a reclamation and saying like, we're bringing you back to, a time in your life when you should have, been protected and safe and just allowed to have joy and freedom in your life. So
when you've gone to see the exhibit in person, what was it like for you to walk through it? But also as you saw other people kind of experiencing it, what was it like to be there? For what I imagine is both a singular and collective experience simultaneously.
Yeah, it was really powerful, especially for me, like the difference between when I saw the sort of first example of it at the Museum of Contemporary Art to see it now in 3 different rooms. It was really sort of, it was really moving. Actually, I cried a lot, right? And just sort of also for me, sort of connecting my own past, my own history, my own experiences as, a Black girl, Black woman now in Chicago to these stories of other women and other girls and sort of knowing, unfortunately, we have this kind of shared history, right? And oftentimes, most women have this shared history of trauma. But it was also really sort of motivating. And there was a kind of like a sense of release as well, specifically like going into the Rest and Recess room. It's called Rest and Recess, the Courtyard. And, it's a powerful exhibit, but it's also one that's a little unexpected, for being included in, the Architectural Biennial, right? So it really makes you think about how place and environment, plays a role for us outside of like homes or skyscrapers or buildings like that. But also, in terms of parks or just sort of, being on the street, walking down the street, the neighborhoods that we live in, it really brings a lot of questions to mind. So
the Black Girlhood Altar is still at the Chicago Cultural Center through March 10th. Make sure you're able to check that out. Moyo, when we talk about the current state of local journalism, local lawmakers, journalism industry leaders who recently filed a report to the General Assembly about the current state of local journalism, but also ways that they're trying to, in some ways, revive, incentivize people. The task force created said that 1/3 of Illinois counties have either no source of local news or a single source coming out of the Northwestern University and Medill School of Journalism. What role do you think, not only you leveraging social media, but, outlets like Axios Chicago play in sort of, re-engaging in people in local journalism?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so unfortunate because those numbers, it's sad, right?
Mm-hmm.
I actually, I got my master's in public affairs reporting in Springfield. And that is also there, there's been reports of the Springfield State House, the reporters there they have seen a decline, about roughly like 10 reporters now, where I think it was in 2000, there was 70 people. And they're down to 10. And that's including, right, the photographer, the editor. So it's not even just reporters. So it's really unfortunate to see that decline.
When you listen to your audience, when you're out doing your interviews on the street, I often feel like there's this sense that this decline is sort of put on the audience. The audience is not engaging, but I'm hearing that people, they do have a thirst for local news, for local events, for knowledge about their city. That's the audience that I've sort of come in contact with. Are you finding it difficult, or are you finding that people are really happy about the offerings you're giving them?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think, to your point, yes, people are not engaged, right? Because there's so much being thrown at us, right? Whether it's a viral TikTok, whether it's hardcore news on TikTok, there's just so much going on. And our jobs, right, as reporters, our jobs as journalists is how can we quickly capture their attention and get them engaged. And we only have, 5 seconds to quickly grab them before they scroll up.
Yo, my name is Jacoby. I want to teach you something real quick. Stick around.
That's true. We have 30 seconds, right? Of course, we have the 5 seconds to grab their attention, but now we have their attention. Let's say you do a 30-second, 60-second Instagram reel. What can you teach them? What local news can you provide to them in that 45 seconds, and how can it benefit them and then draw them back to you? So I think it's up to both of us, right? The consumers, and then us as the journalists, as the experts.
Britt, one story that I sort of missed over the last month and a half was new federal regulations that took effect requiring museums to get consent from tribes before exhibiting certain indigenous cultural items and artifacts. And the Field Museum, beloved museum in Chicago, right, has entire exhibits of Native American and indigenous artifacts, and they have started making changes. Can you kind of catch people up who may be going to the Field Museum and not know, why some things are on display, why some things are removed?
Yeah, so these sort of new rules, they help strengthen what is called the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA. So it was actually became a law, a federal law that was enacted in 1990. But what has happened in the 34 years since it was enacted is that these museums that are essentially supposed to be consulting with different Native organizations, Native Hawaiian organizations, other sort of agencies and tribes in terms of repatriating these specific items and things that are sort of on display in their museums. It's not actually been happening in the way that, it was really intended to. A lot of museums and organizations have been sort of finding loopholes or really sort of keeping things up for display, allowing them to sort of skirt the rules and things like that. So these new guidelines, they specifically talk about items that are for dispossession or repatriation of human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, as well as sort of other items that might have been found in those particular types of means. And there are some institutions that have been sort of pushing back against it. They've been saying, it takes away some of their autonomy in terms of the management of their collections for their museums.
My policy would be give that shit back. And
yes, exactly. Right. And it's Julia Jacobs from the New York Times, she covered this really well, and that she was sort of talking about like what types of objects are off display now and what types of objects are on display. These new rules came into effect in January of this year, right? So something like ear ornaments are off display. Those, typically might have been used for funerary objects or in funerary processions versus an Inuit bag, which is sort of considered more like an everyday tool or accessory. Those are still on display.
If you head to the Field Museum, you should notice some of those display cases will have black coverings over them. The museum spokespeople say they are reaching out to the appropriate tribes, the appropriate descendants, to try and figure out if things can go on display again or if they have to be permanently removed. Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends the same way, and it ends with some good news. This can be an event that's happening in your life, some personal news, a good story you read this week. Moyo, what is your good news for our CityCast people today?
I love the voice. So some good news is I attended the Burna Boy concert in Chicago this week at the Wintrust Arena in the South Loop area. And as a Nigerian American, I was really proud to see him. First of all, his growth, right, in recent years. He also performed at the Grammys this month. He was the first Afrobeats artist to perform at the Grammys. And the Grammys also created their first African category for Best Performer. So it's really exciting. And honestly, the crowd was so diverse in Chicago. Honestly, it was truly amazing to see so many people from different walks of life attend and really enjoy his music. And it was a great Wednesday night. We're back at work, but it was a good time. And I'm proud of him, and I'm excited to see that Afrobeats is having a presence in mainstream media, and a lot of artists are collaborating with them.
Seriously, we were talking about speakeasies earlier. Let's be real. At this point, if your set does not include Afrobeats, it's not complete. It's not legit at this point. Like you got to be blending. You have to be mixing. You got to give people their whole songs at this point. And so most great nights that I go out at this point where I come home and it was like the music was good, it at some point included both some mainstream and some Afrobeat songs that I had never heard. And so, Britt, let's move it over to you. What is your some good news?
I have two things. So first thing, the Old Town School of Folk Music, they are launching their inaugural Black History Month Symposium. So for this year, it's called Black History Folk Futures. And so they're going to have a keynote address, but they're really sort of looking at the history of, Black musical heritage, specifically like in the United States, and how that has sort of impacted the music that we listen to this day. So they'll have some sessions on Black gospel music, on disco demolition and house music, on hip hop. So it's just really kind of exciting to have this new sort of event happening. And it's going to include a performance from Angel Bat Dweeb, who I love, is fantastic, brilliant. So I think it's going to be a really great event. That's this Saturday at the Old Town School of Folk Music. And then just for me personally, I'm really excited. I have an essay that I wrote about growing up as, a Black girl in Chicago, originally from the West Side, Austin area, moving to the suburbs, called Notes on Summer. It's going to be in a new book from Belt Publishing called Best of the Rust Belt. It was previously in a book that they had called Rust Belt Chicago, but this is taking... This new book is taking essays from other books that they've released that have included essays on areas from Pittsburgh to Gary, Indiana, to St. Louis, to Milwaukee, to Cleveland, and to Chicago as well. So I'm very excited about that. And it comes out in July. So you can pre-order it now.
Congrats. I love that.
Come on. Drop a link for us. We'll put that in the show notes for you, my G.
Awesome. I will definitely do that.
We love that for you. And in that spirit, I will finish us out. My good news, I want to give a huge thank you to all of the people who voted for the Chicago Readers Best of Chicago 2023. Especially, I want to thank all of the people who listen to CityCast Chicago, who read Hey Chicago. The podcast was named the best podcast in the city for the third year in a row.
Oh, nice.
And we only been around for 3 years. And so that that kind of feels cool. I kind of feel like Wayne Gretzky or something, 3 years, 3 MVPs or something. And so we are very grateful because it wouldn't happen without all of the voters, all the people who took part. And so if you want to see that entire list, all of the categories, we will drop a link in the show notes. We really enjoy making this podcast. And one of the reasons is because every week we get to sit down and talk to amazing folks like y'all. So I want to give a huge thank you again to our guest today, freelance journalist Britt Julius. Thank you for making time for CityCast, my friend.
Thank you.
And Axios Chicago social host Moyo Adeolu. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me.
Before I let you go, I got to give a huge thank you to the people responsible for CityCast Chicago being a 3-time Best of Chicago podcast winner. That's for executive producer Simone Alicea, our producer Michelle Navarro, our newsletter editor Sydney Madden, additional work this week from roving newsletter editor Natalia Aldana. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, all the kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. If this is your first episode of CityCast Chicago, stick around, but also engage some of the other ways you can get down with us. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at CityCast Chicago. You can visit our website, chicago.citycast.fm, for everything from the latest headlines, weekend events, and neighborhood guides. But also, if you got episode ideas, reach out to us. We want to hear them. Leave us a text or a voicemail at 773-780-0246. And of course, the best way to show that you love us, subscribe to the daily newsletter, Hey Chicago, and be back here bright and early on Monday. I'm going to talk to you then. Peace.